Welcome to the Deep Dive. We sift through the noise, find the knowledge, and help you get informed fast. Today we're going on, well, a bit of an adventure. We want to uncover the deep logic, sometimes really surprising logic, behind behavior. Think everything from, giraffes, all the way to human relationships. Our mission here is to really explore how basic evolutionary principles explain social behavior in animals, but also how they can radically challenge some of our most common assumptions about ourselves.
Yeah, and it's fascinating looking at the questionnaire responses for this one. Some really varied perspectives. We got things like, my dad used to make me read books about human behavior and biology as punishment, which, okay. And then others just, I'm human and I often behave. Simple as that. It really shows the wide range and sometimes the confusion people have about what really drives what we do.
Exactly. So here's the big question we're kind of wrestling with today. Can we actually predict really complex stuff like, say, aggression or how animals parent just by looking at a simple biological clue, like maybe the difference in skull size between males and females? Okay, let's dive in and unpack this. You know how in nature shows they'll show you something incredible? Like a giraffe needs this massive heart, right, to pump blood way up to its head. And the narrator goes, isn't nature amazing? Biologists can predict the exact size and it's perfect. Or like desert rodents surviving on almost no water and scientists figure out exactly how their kidneys must work and bang, they're right. It feels almost magical.
Well, here's the thing that's really compelling. It's not magic at all. It's not even really amazing in that sense. These aren't lucky breaks. They're necessary outcomes. Logical results of survival demands. I mean, you couldn't have a giraffe if its heart wasn't that size. It just wouldn't work. Or that desert rodent. It wouldn't survive if its kidneys weren't built that specific way. There's this inevitable logic to how organisms are built, how they function, how they evolve. It's all about optimizing a solution to a problem. And the really fascinating part, these exact same principles, this kind of inevitable logic, they don't just apply to anatomy. They apply with equal force to the evolution of behavior. And it's a common mistake to think Darwin discovered evolution itself. People had ideas about species changing way before him. Darwin's huge contribution, the game changer, was figuring out the mechanism of selection. And the building blocks are actually pretty simple. First, traits have to be heritable. You got to be able to pass them down. Second, there needs to be variability, different versions of those traits floating around. Third, some versions work better than others. They're more adaptive. They increase the chance an organism passes on more copies of its genes. And notice, it's not just survival of the fittest, it's really reproduction of the fittest. That's key. And finally, occasionally random new traits pop up. Mutations.
Okay, so these building blocks, heritability, variability, they make sense for physical things like heart size or kidney function. But how do they work for something like behavior that seems less concrete?
It's essentially the same blueprint. You have behaviors that can be passed down, heritable behaviors. You have variations in those behaviors between individuals. Some are more shy, some more bold, for example. And over generations, the versions of behavior that are more adaptive, that lead to more gene copies getting passed on, they become more common. You can even get, believe it or not, a behavioral mutation. A totally new way of acting pops up. Now, the whole question of how genetic a specific behavior really is a huge topic. Sometimes a bit incendiary. We'll definitely touch on that as we go. Oh, and one really critical point before we go deeper, a caveat, if you will. You'll hear people, including us, probably, using shorthand. We might say something like, what would a chimpanzee want to do to maximize her gene copies? But look, animals aren't sitting around strategizing. They're not taking Evo bio classes. They don't want things in the human sense of conscious planning. Their behaviors have been shaped, sculpted over millennia by these powerful evolutionary pressures. They end up doing what's optimal, but without consciously thinking, this is optimal.
Right, that makes sense. It's a useful way to think about it, but we shouldn't take the personification literally. So if it's not about animals trying to be amazing, what are the fundamental rules driving their behavior? And apparently we need to start by knocking down a really common myth. You see it all the time in documentaries, right? The classic scene, wildebeest at a river, crocodiles waiting. Suddenly, some old wildebeest, looking all noble, jumps in, sacrifices itself, distracts the crocs, the herd crosses safely, and the narrator says, animals behave for the good of the species. But that idea, which was pushed by Wyn Edwards years ago, is apparently just completely wrong according to modern evolutionary thinking.
Oh, absolutely trashed. Yeah, completely. The fundamental truth, the absolute bedrock of modern evolutionary theory is this. Animals behave to maximize the number of copies of their own genes passed to the next generation. It's not about the group, not about the species. It's about individual genetic success. And if you look closely at that wildebeest scenario, that old one isn't volunteering. Almost certainly it's being pushed from behind by the others trying to get across. Less noble, sacrifice more. unfortunate shove. So this leads us to the 3 core building blocks for understanding evolutionary behavior. The first one is individual selection. This is the most straightforward. An animal behaves in ways that maximize the number of copies of its own genes, mainly by reproducing itself. There's that stark saying, sometimes a chicken is just an egg's way of making another egg. No! All the complex behavior, the social stuff, it's really just an epiphenomenon, a means to an end. And the end is getting more genes into the future. And within individual selection, you've got 2 main forces pushing things.
There's natural selection traits that directly help survival and reproduction, like being fast enough to escape a predator. And then there's sexual selection. These are traits that might not help survival at all, might even hurt it, but they make an individual more attractive to mates. Think of like a male fish with super bright colors. Makes him easy for predators to spot, but females love it. Sometimes these 2 forces, natural and sexual selection, are pulling in totally different directions.
Okay, so individual selection is all about me, from the gene's perspective. Optimize my own chances, make myself attractive. What are some maybe surprising behaviors that really highlight this focus on just getting your own genes passed on?
Well, yeah, sometimes it leads to behaviors that seem incredibly costly or risky for the individual survival. Take male bowerbirds. They spend ages building these incredibly elaborate structures, the bowers, decorated with specific colors, perfectly arranged. It takes tons of energy, makes them vulnerable while they're doing it, and the bower itself offers 0 protection. But it's a huge, honest signal to females about the male's quality, his health, his skills, his persistence. He's not doing it for bowerbird kind. He's doing it to convince a female to mate with him, to get his genes into the next generation. Pure individual selection, okay? Second building block, kin selection, also called inclusive fitness. This is where things get a bit more subtle. An animal can maximize its gene copies not just by reproducing itself, but by helping its relatives reproduce. Why? Because relatives share genes. The famous geneticist J.B.S. Haldane summed it up perfectly, if maybe a bit dramatically. He said, "I will gladly lay down my life for 2 brothers or 8 cousins. There's actual math beyond that. You share, on average, 50% of your genes with a full sibling and 12.5% or 1/8 with a first cousin." So, from a gene's point of view, helping 2 siblings survive and reproduce is genetically equivalent to saving yourself. Saving 8 cousins. Same deal. It's cold, hard genetic calculus.
That's fascinating. It implies animals have this almost intuitive grasp about relatedness, even without, 23andMe. What are some clear examples where you see this kin selection logic playing out in the wild?
Oh, it's everywhere once you start looking. Vervet monkeys are a great example. Researchers did this experiment. They played a recording of an infant monkey's alarm call from a hidden speaker. The infant's mother naturally, instantly looks towards the speaker, towards the source of the call. But here's the cool part. Other vervet monkeys in the group don't look at the speaker. They look at the mother. They understand the relationship. They know whose baby is potentially in trouble and are watching the mother's reaction. Another example, sometimes called displaced revenge, if, say, female monkey A attacks female monkey B. Well, later on, female B's kid is statistically more likely to go after female A's kid. They're keeping track of who's related to whom, who owes whom. It's like monkey soap operas, but driven by genetics. All right, and the third building block, reciprocal altruism. This is about cooperation, but specifically between non-relatives. And it comes with a very strict condition. The favor has to be returned. It has to be reciprocated. This isn't just like avoiding mutual destruction like you see in some bacteria that don't poison each other. This is active cooperation. Many hens make light work, basically. Think about cooperative hunting. A group of unrelated hunters working together might bring down prey. None could manage alone. Everyone benefits. Mark Hauser did some great work with rhesus monkeys. He found monkeys who shared food were more likely to have food shared with them later. And they were also more likely to get help on tasks where you needed 2 monkeys working together to get a treat. Clear reciprocity. Now, for this to really work well, certain conditions usually apply. The animals need to be pretty smart, social, able to recognize different individuals.
Right, they need to remember who helped them last time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they need to live long enough to have repeated interactions. You need the chance to pay back the favor or to punish someone who didn't reciprocate. Though, intriguingly, we're now seeing reciprocal patterns even in microbes, like bacteria and fungi. They seem to recognize cheating strains and withhold cooperation. And a really crucial part of this is being vigilant against cheaters. Humans, and it turns out chimps too, are way, way better at spotting when someone has cheated or broken a social contract than they are at noticing random acts of kindness. Detecting cheaters seems to be a deeply ingrained skill.
Okay, so we have these drivers. Maximize your own genes, individual selection, help your relatives' genes, kin selection, and cooperate with non-relatives, but only if they cooperate back, reciprocal altruism. This last one, reciprocal altruism, raises a really interesting question. How does an individual decide when to cooperate and when to, well, cheat or defect? This seems like it could get complicated fast. And this, I gather, is where we get into the mathematics of it all, into game theory.
Precisely. Game theory provides the tools to analyze these strategic decisions. And the absolute classic, the sort of fruit fly model organism for game theory, is the prisoner's dilemma. It sets up a scenario, usually described with two prisoners who have to decide whether to confess or stay silent. But the payoffs apply much more broadly. Basically, you get the biggest reward if you cheat, defect, while the other person cooperates. You exploited them. That's payoff number one. The next best outcome is mutual cooperation. You both play nice, you both get a decent reward, then comes mutual defection. You both cheat and you both get punished, but maybe not as badly as being the sucker. And the absolute worst outcome, the sucker's payoff, is when you cooperate, but the other person cheats on you. You get totally burned. Initially, this was a big tool for economists, political scientists thinking about arms races, negotiations. Then in the 1970s, this political scientist, Robert Axelrod, did something brilliant. He ran computer tournaments playing the prisoner's dilemma repeatedly. He experts from all fields, game theorists, biologists, economists, psychologists. Legend has, he even asked, prize fighters and theologians for strategies. He programmed all these different strategies into a computer and had them play against each other in a massive round-robin tournament, thousands and thousands of rounds.
And the winner, surprisingly, wasn't some complex, sneaky strategy. It was something called tit for tat, which sounds simple, and it kind of is. What are the rules for tit for tat?
Incredibly simple. 4 key features. 1, it's nice. It always starts by cooperating on the first move. Gives the benefit of the doubt. 2, it's retaliatory. If the other player cheats, defects, tit for tat immediately punishes them by defecting on the next move. 3, it's forgiving. As soon as the other player goes back to cooperating, tit for tat instantly forgives and cooperates too. It doesn't hold a grudge. And 4, it's clear-cut or non-probabilistic. Its response is totally predictable based on the other player's last move. No randomness.
Okay, nice. Retaliatory, forgiving, clear-cut. And this simple strategy, it won.
It dominated. Axelrod found tit for tat consistently won the war, even if it sometimes lost battles. Meaning, in any single head-to-head matchup, it might not get the absolute highest score if it was playing against a really nice strategy it couldn't exploit. But over the long run, in a population of big strategies, tit for tat drove the nasty, exploitative strategies towards extinction. Its combination of initial niceness and swift retaliation proved incredibly robust. However, it wasn't perfect. A big weakness emerged. Signal error.
Signal error, what does that mean?
Imagine there's a glitch. You think the other player cheated, but they actually cooperated. Maybe a message got lost or you misinterpreted something. A pure tit-for-tat strategy would then retaliate against an innocent player. That player, also playing tit-for-tat, would see your defection and retaliate back. And suddenly you're locked in this endless cycle, the seesaw of mutual defection, even though it all started with a mistake. Think about, the Cold War. A mistaken radar blip could, in theory, trigger a devastating tit-for-tat retaliation cascade.
Ah, okay, so a single mistake could break cooperation permanently. That seems like a pretty big flaw for real-world situations where misunderstandings happen all the time. Did the game theory models evolve to handle this? Did better strategies come along?
Yes, exactly. People started tweaking it. Strategies like forgiving tit-for-tat, or sometimes called generous tit-for-tat, emerged. This version might, occasionally cooperate even after the opponent defected, just to break those negative cycles and give cooperation another chance. Then you got more complex ideas like trust-based tit-for-tat, where maybe you only start offering forgiveness after a long period of established cooperation. Build up trust first. There's even a weird one called Pavlov, sometimes win-stay-lose shift. It basically cooperates only if its last interaction was mutually cooperative or if it successfully exploited the other guy. It punishes mutual defection and being the sucker. It can actually exploit overly forgiving strategies.
Yeah.
But the really exciting step was when biologists started looking at these models and asking, okay, this is cool math, but do actual animals behave like tit-for-tat players?
Right. This is where it gets really interesting. Are animals in the wild actually running these kinds of cost-benefit analyses, consciously or not? Do we see tit-for-tat out there?
We do, in some really striking examples. Take vampire bats. They live in groups, often non-relatives, and share blood meals. If a bat fails to feed one night, it might starve. So a bat that had a successful hunt will regurgitate some blood to feed a hungry neighbor. But it's reciprocal. They remember who fed them. Researchers did a clever experiment. They caught a bat after it fed, gently pumped air into its stomach sac so it looked full, but didn't actually have blood to share. When they released it back into the roost, the other bats treated it like a cheater. They remembered it hadn't shared because it couldn't, and they were less likely to share blood with it the next time it was hungry. It's like punishing a perceived defection caused by a signal error.
Wow. So the bats reacted to the appearance of cheating.
Exactly. Then there's the stickleback fish. They defend territories. Researchers put a mirror next to a stickleback's tank. The fish treats its reflection like another stickleback, a potential partner for defense against intruders, other fish, presented by the researchers. Then they angled the mirror slightly during a simulated attack, so the reflection seemed to hang back, like it wasn't helping, like it was defecting. What did the real stickleback do next time? It was less likely to approach its reflection to cooperate in defense. It punished the reflection for cheating. Tit-for-tat logic operated within a single fish's perception. And one more, the black hamlet fish. These are simultaneous hermaphrodites. They have both male and female organs. They form pairs and take turns releasing eggs, female role, and fertilizing them, male role. The female role costs more energy, so they usually trade roles fairly evenly. But if one fish starts cheating by trying to be the male too often, basically trying to get the cheaper reproductive role, the partner fish stops cooperating. It refuses to play the female role until the other one starts playing fair again. Classic tit for tat.
It's just wild to see these sophisticated strategies playing out in bats and fish. It really drives home that point you made earlier, doesn't it? This isn't necessarily amazing cooperation popping out of nowhere. It's the same kind of inevitable, optimized logic we saw with the giraffe's heart. These behaviors have to work this way due to evolutionary pressures.
Exactly. But, we should add a note of caution. The real world isn't always quite as neat as the prisoner's dilemma model. Craig Packer's long-term studies on lion prize found something interesting. Sometimes, during territorial disputes, when recordings of intruder lions were played, some male lions consistently hung back. They were labeled scaredy cats. But according to pure tit-for-tat, they should have been punished by the braver lions, maybe driven out. But they weren't. Why not? Well, maybe other games were being played simultaneously. Perhaps those scaredy cat lions contributed in other ways. Maybe they were better hunters, maybe they ate less at kills, maybe they were crucial allies in other types of disputes. Real life involves multiple interactions, multiple trade-offs.
So it's not always just one simple game being played.
Right. And think about naked mole rats. These things are, they're incredibly weird mammals. They live in huge underground colonies, almost like insects, with a queen and workers. For a long time, they seemed to defy optimization. You'd see these big, older mole rats just lounging around, eating food, doing no work, and nobody seemed to punish them for being lazy freeloaders. But then researchers discovered their hidden role. During the rainy season, when tunnels could flood or predators might find openings, these big, lazy mole rats would wedge themselves into tunnel entrances, basically acting as living plugs, putting themselves at huge risk. So they weren't freeloading, they had a specialized, dangerous job. It shows role diversification. Again, multiple games, different contributions balancing out. It reminds me actually of James Holland, who got the first PhD in computer science, started introducing things like mutation into game theory strategies, making them evolve over time, further blurring that line between biological evolution and strategic modeling.
Okay, so we have individual selection, kin selection, reciprocal altruism, and the complexities of game theory like tit-for-tat, plus the real-world wrinkles like multiple games and role diversification. Let's bring this back to where we started. Can we use these principles to predict broad patterns of social behavior just from simple biological clues? You mentioned skull size earlier, sexual dimorphism, the size difference between males and females. How does that connect?
Okay, yeah, let's do that. Imagine we have two hypothetical primate species we just discovered. We measure the skulls, or just look at the body sizes. Species AA. Males are way bigger than females. Huge difference. High sexual dimorphism. Species B. Males and females are basically the same size. Low or no sexual dimorphism. Just from that one piece of information, the degree of dimorphism, we can predict a whole suite of social and behavioral characteristics with surprising accuracy. Let's take the tournament species. First, species A, where males are much bigger, like baboons, gorillas, peacocks even. What do we predict? High levels of male-on-male aggression, lots of fighting for dominance or access to mates, huge variability in male reproductive success. Think like 5% of the males might sire 95% of the offspring. Most males get 0. What do females choose? Big, strong, aggressive males. They're choosing for good genes because that male isn't sticking around to help raise the kids. Those peacock feathers, they're an honest signal of health. Look how much energy I can waste on this useless, beautiful tail. Male parental behavior, basically 0. Absent fathers, lifespan. Males tend to have shorter lifespans. High testosterone has costs, injuries from fighting, huge energy expenditure. Twinning. Females almost never have twins. A single mother can't raise two, the odds are too low without male help. And female cuckoldry, cheating on the primary mate. Generally not seen, or at least it's not a major strategy, because the high-status male is often gone anyway, or paternity is uncertain.
Okay, that's a clear picture for the tournament species. Big males, lots of fighting, absentee dads, females choosing muscles. Now what about species B, where males and females are the same size? The pair bonding types.
Right, the pair bonding or monogamous species. Think marmosets, tamarins, many bird species. Low sexual dimorphism. What do we predict here? Very low male aggression, no need for intense fighting. Low variability in male reproductive success. Pretty much every male finds a partner and has maybe 1 or 2 kids over his lifetime. Much more egalitarian. What do females choose? Not muscles. They choose males based on indicators of parental competence. Good personality, maybe similarity to themselves, proven ability to find food or defend a nest. They're choosing a partner. Male parental behavior, high. Males provide as much, sometimes even more parental care than females. Think of male birds feeding chicks. Lifespan, no significant difference between males and females. Twinning, females often twin. Or have larger litters, why? Because dad is there to help provide resources and care. 2 parents make it feasible. And female cuckoldry. Yes, it is sometimes seen in pair bonding species. Why? Because the reliable parental male is sticking around to raise the kids anyway, potentially freeing up the female to seek better genes from elsewhere occasionally, while still having guaranteed parental care.
That is genuinely incredible. Just knowing the relative size of males and females lets you predict aggression levels, who raises the kids, how females choose mates, even whether twins are common. It really shows how these evolutionary pressures shape the entire social fabric of a species in a predictable, logical way.
So the million-dollar question, where do humans fit on this spectrum? Tournament or pair bonding? And the answer is, well, we're kind of awkwardly, complicatedly, right in the middle. Look at human sexual dimorphism. Males are, on average, a bit bigger than females, but not dramatically so like gorillas, were moderately dimorphic. Look at reproductive variability, it's higher than in strict pair bonders, but nowhere near the extreme skew seen in tournament species. Lifespans, slight difference, males slightly shorter, but again, not huge. Parental behavior. Highly variable but significant male investment is common, unlike pure tournament species. Across almost all these measures, humans fall somewhere, confusedly in between. We're terribly confused in the middle, evolutionarily speaking. You see this reflected in our social structures too. While many modern cultures favor monogamy, anthropologically, most human societies throughout history have permitted polygyny, one man, multiple wives. But even within those polygynous societies, most individuals still lived in effectively pair-bonded units. You might have economic polygyny, where only the wealthiest men could afford multiple wives, creating some reproductive skew. Or demographic polygyny, maybe in warrior cultures with high male mortality, leading to older men marrying younger women. But the underlying tendency toward pair bonding alongside tournament-like competition is always there.
That confused in the middle status, that feels very real. It perhaps explains so much about human relationships, doesn't it? The tension between desire for partnership and maybe impulses towards competition or novelty, the huge cultural variation in marriage and family structures. We're grappling with these mixed evolutionary signals. So let's just quickly recap this whole journey. We started by seeing that nature's logic isn't amazing magic, but optimization. We unpacked the 3 core drivers: individual selection, getting your own genes out there, kin selection, helping relatives' genes, and reciprocal altruism, cooperating conditionally with non-relatives. And we saw how game theory, especially ideas like tit for tat, gives us a mathematical way to understand how cooperation and cheating strategies evolve and stabilize.
Exactly. And those seemingly complex behaviors, we see the bat sharing blood, the fish calculating cooperation, the lion pride dynamics, they aren't random quirks. They're the logical outcomes of these fundamental principles playing out over generations. It's the same relentless logic that dictates the size of a giraffe's heart or the function of a desert rodent's kidney, just applied to the realm of social behavior. Optimized solutions to the problem of getting genes into the future.
Which brings us back to us, the species confused in the middle. Knowing this evolutionary backdrop, knowing we carry echoes of both tournament-style competition and pair bonding cooperation, what does that really imply? What does it suggest about our own desires, our conflicts, the complexities we navigate in our personal relationships, and even in our wider societies? Maybe something to think about the next time you find yourself observing social behavior, whether as watching animals at the park, or perhaps even reflecting on your own interactions. Consider the deep, ancient evolutionary forces that might just be pulling the strings.